Welcome to the Midlife Men podcast with me, Philip Briscoe. In this episode, we're looking at techniques you can practice for combating depression. According to some reports, up to 14% of men in the UK experience depression, and I suspect that number's actually a lot higher. This episode's a little different, so instead of the usual interview format, Dave Williams, who's an author, speaker, and award-winning coach, is going to be talking about his own experience with depression and how he found strategies to not just help himself, but other people too, which is what he does now for a living. Dave will be presenting a mini-masterclass on the straightforward techniques he teaches to anyone who's struggling with depression, or even just finding it difficult to motivate themselves to do even the most simple everyday tasks.
Welcome, and it's lovely to actually be in your company. So thank you very much indeed for investing some of your time to actually watch and listen to this. We all have challenges in life, don't we? And the reality is, for one of my main ones, we need to go back some years. So if you'd have actually been with me on the 10th of December in 2015, you'd have been entering this white square, clean smelling room that was, quite cool and airy, really. Covering about a third of this room was a blue type shower curtain. And as I pulled back the curtain, there she is. There's Helen, or Hel as I call her, my partner. Now, Hel's about 5'10" with shortish brown hair and one of those greying streaks that runs from the front to the back that she absolutely despises. Now, Hel's full of fun. She's the yin to my yang, my sparring partner. Hel's the love of my life. Mr. Williams, it is now time for you to leave. It's a voice I didn't really want to hear from an officious-looking doctor in a three-quarter-length white coat. You see, Hel and I were at the Royal Derby Hospital, and Hel wasn't being prepared for an operation. She was being prepared for the morgue. So if you'd have been with me in this February evening in 2016, you'd have been sat in my corner upholstery group with white walls either side, a red feature wall in front of you. I know the bookcase is in that corner and the TV is in that corner. But this particular evening, I couldn't see them because the darkness that I was feeling inside was matching the darkness of this non-lit room. See, the reality was I was lost, contemplating the point of life. I was depressed. And I was lonely. Now, I don't really know what happened next. But the next thing that I knew, it may well have been seconds, it may well have been minutes. But I was standing over the kitchen units with a carving knife in my right hand and a knife blade across my wrists. That was a massive wake-up call. And I knew that I had a decision to make, either to stay where I was and be unhappy and questioning everything in life. And I knew the reality was I wouldn't be around too much longer. Or I could make a decision to actually start to improve my life. So that's what I did. So I went searching for strategies to help me improve my situation. But the reality was I couldn't find any that worked for me. So I started putting some strategies in place. And lo and behold, they started to work. And over a period of time, I started to improve. And not only that, I started to share some of these strategies with other people and they started to get great results as well, but in a much shorter space of time. So where do you find me now? Well, no longer am I lost, because I'm loving everything that I do in life. No longer am I depressed because I've got a passion for actually helping people be the best that they can be. And no longer am I lonely because I've got a phenomenal array of people around me that are absolutely inspirational. And most of them have come through what I do. And on top of that, you also find me as a #1 best-selling author, speaker, award-winning master coach. So life on itself is absolutely great. And it all started with making that decision. But I'm also a realist, in as much as we do go through challenges in life. And, the reality is, maybe you're like I am. And when you were at school, you thought that when you leave school, you'll get a job, you'll find a partner, you'll have children, and then you retire. So it's a nice, flat, straight line. And yet when you become more experienced in life, what you find is the line is all over the place, because life is full of peaks and troughs, isn't it? And it's great when we're at the top of the peaks, but when we hit the troughs, that's when life can actually become an awful lot more of a challenge. Pardon me. So now it's realistically, it's one of the elements that I do. I actually help people become their best selves and move away from the challenges that they've got, or at least give them the skill set to be able to change those and improve their lives for the better. See, what I didn't realize I was doing at the time, when I was going through my darkest moments, and they were really, really dark, realistically, it was a case of being totally rock bottom. What I didn't realize that I was doing was I wasn't looking after myself. And I was asking myself all sorts of wrong questions. And maybe you can relate to a little bit of this, in as much as, questions such as, why is it you're so stupid? Why is it you can't do things like that? You'll never be good enough to achieve anything. And maybe some of those questions would resonate with yourself. I don't know. And I was filling my time really well, because I became pretty much an expert at watching Jeremy Kyle. Now, for those of you of a certain age, you will remember Jeremy Kyle. And those of you that don't, basically it was a talk show wasn't really a talk show, really. It was a case of Jeremy Kyle had guests on, of which quite often, yes, should we say they had challenges, quite often family challenges, and he used to try and get to the bottom of them. And sometimes it could be argued that he used to bully them. Now, why did he used to watch that? Quite simple, because I was distracting myself from dealing with what I needed to deal with, which was me, and was focusing on other people, and they seemed to have worse lives than what I did. And that's what my life was. Yeah, it really was. And the thing that really started to change for myself is that instance, like I say, with the carving knife and my arm, and making the decision that I needed to change. Not I wanted to change, I needed to change. And that was the thing for me. So I started putting these strategies in place, like I say, and I'm going to share some of those with you now. Because if you've got challenges, then, first of all, my heart goes out to you. And I wish you every success in overcoming those, because I'm a firm believer that you can. But when we're in the depths of them, it doesn't necessarily feel like that. And sometimes it feels like we're in a vortex and we're actually looking for the way out. And sometimes it's a bit of a challenge to find that doorway. So these particular things is something that I did, although I didn't realize this was what I was doing at the time. So I freely admit that. Okay. And what I'm going to be sharing with you is, when I came across this information, it's by a gentleman called Tony Robbins. Now, you may well be aware of Tony. If not, then basically he's the biggest life coach on the planet. He's had about 40 years of doing life coaching. He's coached 4 US presidents. So it just gives you an idea. And realistically, he's 6'7" and his teeth are actually bigger than my head. He's a big guy. But Tony's actually been doing these strategies for many, many years. So I'm not going to say and claim that they're my strategies. I didn't know about Tony at the time, but I don't want to come over as actually trying to pinch someone else's strategies or anything along those lines, because there's nothing further from the truth. So hence I'm going to refer to Tony's strategies. So just to actually point out, like I say, it's Tony's information. realize that this is what I did to actually change me. So I'm going to share them with yourself, and hopefully, you can actually see some patterns that you've got. And hopefully this information potentially is going to help you. Now, I'm male and breathing. I like things simple. Okay. That's a matter of fact. Why complicate so many different things when quite often we can get better results when we simplify them? So for those of you that are just listening to this, I've drawn a triangle on the flip chart. Okay. Now, Tony's posh. Yeah, he calls it a triad. All right. But it's a triangle at the end of the day. And there's actually 3 points to a triangle, obviously. So when we're going through challenges, and like I said, this is something that I was doing poorly when I was going through my real challenges. Because like I say, if I was getting up, I was just sort of vegging in front of the TV. So the first one that we look at is your physiology. Now, physiology, that's a posh word for what you do with your body. But if you think about it, so as you're watching and listening to this, I'm going to ask you a question. So, yes, this is going to sound a bit surreal. I know that, okay? But when I ask you these, just call out to the screen or your phone or whatever it is and see if you go along with me here, okay? Don't worry if anyone else is listening or around you. Yeah, don't worry about them at all. All right? They'll probably giggle along with you. But let me ask you a question. If you were to describe someone that was depressed, what would their body look like? Would they be standing straight, or would they more likely be slumped over? Okay, probably slumped over is probably the answer that you've given. Yeah, when you think about, as far as their breathing is concerned, is it normal breathing? Is it fast breathing? Or is it really, really slow? Most of the time, it's actually really slow. And when they're actually talking as well, how do they talk? Do they actually talk like I am, like a visual person or whatever? Or is it normally an awful lot quieter and a lot slower? Most of you are going to say slower and quieter. And that's just it. That's what normally happens when people are actually not feeling their best. And we change that through how we use our body. And one of the first things that we do, and I use these techniques with all of my personal clients, okay? So it's not something that I'm just making up or I've heard something and I'm spouting it. Not at all. I use these basically on a daily basis with clients. I certainly use them with myself on a daily basis. Why? Because it works, okay? So the first thing as far as physiology is concerned, excuse me, is your breathing. So again, if you're just watching this on audio, sorry, you're just listening to this on audio, I've just written breathing on the board. See, what tends to happen when we're not feeling good about ourselves, we tend to forget to breathe. Yeah, it sounds surreal, doesn't it? But we change our breathing pattern. And we do tend to breathe an awful lot slower. And one of the ways to actually change your physiology is to change your breathing. And a couple of quick exercises for you now. And that is the fact that, first of all, and again, it doesn't matter where you are, don't worry about anyone else. So the reality is, if we change our breathing, we change our physiology. Why is that important? Because when we move our body, it changes our emotion. And we as human beings are all about emotion. Yeah? Emotion comes from motion. So that's why physiology is so important. The more we move, the better we feel. And that's why if you go to any mental health websites or anything along those lines, one of the things that they suggest is do exercise, go for a walk. Why? Because you're changing your physiology. That's the real reason, okay? So when it comes to the breathing, okay, so you can do this with me, all right? Okay, and like I say, who cares if there's anyone else around you or whatever? So what I'd like you to do is either sit or stand, whichever's easiest for yourself. So with your shoulders back, with your chest out a bit, and what I'd like you to do is deep breath in, hold, and then exhale. Okay, so I'll give you the cues on that, all right? So you ready? Okay, so here we go. 1, 2, 3. Deep breath in, hold, and exhale. And again, deep breath in, hold a bit longer, and exhale. Okay, and again, deep breath in, hold, and exhale. Okie dokie. So we've only done it 3 times, okay? So be honest with yourself. Does your body feel anything different? For some of you, it will be a case of yes. And when that happens, that's how easy it is to change your physiology. Because what happens when you actually do that, your nerves, your nerve endings and everything, and it starts getting to your psyche and you start to feel better. And when you think about it, mental health is the fact that we're not feeling great. So I prefer the term mental wellness, really. And this is all as far as mental wellness is concerned. And that's how easy it is to actually change your breathing. So that's one little exercise. Normally, if with a client or whatever, I would normally get them to do it a minimum of 10 times. And if we are face to face, I can normally see their body change anyway. So as we're not going to be seeing each other, what I suggest is at least 10, possibly 12 times. And just see how you feel once you've done that 10 or 12 times in comparison to what you're like beforehand. See, there are so many things that are connected with how we feel to our breathing. I heard a story of, it was someone, it was myself the other day. I was feeling a bit stressed out. I had an awful lot going on. I was spinning an awful lot of plates. And again, maybe that's something you can relate to. Spinning a heck of a lot of plates. And I was feeling a bit stressed. And have you ever been in a situation where you snapped at someone? Yeah. And it's not their fault. Have you ever done that? Yeah. Well, that's what I was doing at that particular time. And I caught myself doing it. And I looked at myself and what wasn't working. And the reality was, it was my physiology. I was scrunched up. And the reality was, because I was scrunched up, I wasn't breathing properly. I was breathing shallow instead of, full lunged. So once I identified it, I changed my breathing and then, hey, we could go again. And that's how important breathing can be. So I said there's 2 exercises. So that was 1. Okay. Now you don't need to do this next one, because what I would suggest to you, if you're going to do this one, is just get a hanky or a tissue or anything just before you start. All right. But you can actually do this sat down. If you're driving, you can actually do this as well. And that is the fact of what you're going to do is literally inhale quickly 4 times and then exhale quickly 4 times. So I'll go through it 2 or 3 times for you. Okay. So it'd be a case. Okay. And that's all it is. So you inhale quickly through your nose and exhale quickly through your mouth. Okay. And again, I can feel my body changing already. I really can. And I'm not just saying that for the purpose of the audio or indeed the visual, however you're doing that. Okay, it's because you're actually putting intense movement into what you're doing with your breathing. Okay, so there's something else that may well just help. Okay, so breathing is one of them. Obviously, the way you move your body is another one. Now, I shared with you a bit earlier on, being a Sati slug, and watching Jeremy Kyle all the time. I wasn't moving. And when we don't move, our body just turns into a sloth effect, where everything then becomes a bit of a challenge. But if you think about it, When we have something really important that we think about, then all of a sudden we can actually move really quickly, can't we? Yes, of course we can, because that becomes our focus, which I'll talk about in a sec. Okay, so we need to move our body. And I was doing a presentation with someone yesterday, and they said, "Are you standing up?" So I said, "Yes, of course I am." And they said, sorry, it was a virtual presentation, and they were sat down. So I said, "Why is it you're standing up?" I said, "Well, I stand up because I then create more energy. When I create more energy, I'm more energetic with how I'm presenting." And that's the reason, as I mentioned a bit earlier on, emotion comes from motion. And the more energetic that we are, the more impact that we have for ourselves, and the more we can impact other people. Because the more energetic, the more emotion that we have in our lives, the better we're actually going to feel when it comes to emotional intelligence, mental wellness, and indeed mental health. So motion is so important, and it's how we move our body. Now, another one, and again, I'm just writing this on the board for those of you purely audio, facial expressions. Yeah, we have so many different facial expressions, and yet we tend to exercise them in the wrong way. Yeah, it takes about 4 times as many facial muscles to frown than what it does to smile. And have you ever been out and about? Let's say walking down the high street as an example. Have you ever been out and about and you've smiled at someone? Yeah, have you ever had that? And if that happens, what normally happens? What does the other person normally do? They smile back, don't they? Either that or they think that you're weird, whichever. It doesn't really matter. But for most, what tends to happen when we smile at someone is smile back. Or maybe you've had that happen to you. I know I did when I was going through my really dark times. Yeah, I walked into the local supermarket and there was a member of the management team there. As I walked through the door, just smiled at me. And because I wasn't in a good place, because I just managed to get myself off the settee and go out, I burst into tears. For the simple reason I thought someone's taking an interest in me. And that's the impact that we can have on ourselves, first of all, and then on other people, when we actually smile, when we move our body. So physiology is so important. And all the things that I've actually shared with you there are relatively simple to do. Okay. So the first one is physiology. Right. That's one section of the triangle or the triad. Okay. The next one is communication. Communication is a phenomenal thing, a phenomenal tool that we have, and yet most people tend to do it the wrong way. Okay. Pardon me. I came across a study a while ago. Forgive me, I can't remember the company that actually did it, but it was they said that the average human being has between 12,000 and 60,000 thoughts in a day. Yeah, I know. Why the variance between 12 and 60? But that's a different story. And yet, 80%, that's 80 of the thoughts that they have on a daily basis are negative. 80%. And the really scary thing is, the following day, 95% of the thoughts that we have were a repeat of the thoughts that we had the previous day. So if the previous day we had 80% negative thoughts, and then the next day we're having 95% of those same thoughts again, no wonder we've actually got challenges when it comes to mental health. So the way that we communicate to ourselves is so important. I shared the odd thing with you just a little bit earlier on, as far as the type of questions that I was asking myself were really, really negative questions. See, I was talking to myself all the time the wrong way. And I discovered you're going to have to bear with me on audio here. I've just written the no. No, I won't, not just yet. What's the most negative letter in the alphabet? Okay, just have a think about it. Now, if we were together in person, I would actually say call out your answers. Now, obviously, you can still call out your answers. It's just that I won't be able to hear you, right? So the most negative letter in the alphabet. Okay, I'll put you out your misery. It's actually T. And you may well say, T? How can T be the most negative letter in the alphabet? And it's a great question if that's what you're thinking. Now, realistically, what I was doing through my darkest times, I was constantly talking to myself. But I was constantly doing it in a negative way. And that's just it. And because I was doing it constantly, negative talk, I was actually affirming in my own mind what the truth was. And that was all negative. And that backs up what I've just shared as far as those stats were concerned about the 80% and then the 95. Because this is what I was doing all the time. And I didn't realize it. And when you do that, if you're listening to this on audio, what we've got on the flip chart now is Cant, C-A-N-T. What I didn't realize is I was doing this so much, and that's when I discovered what the most negative letter of the alphabet is. So I started to get rid of the T, and I realized that T should either be drunk or you hit a golf ball off. And for those of you on audio, I've just done a golf swing, and you realize why I don't play golf, right? Because we can do anything if we ask ourselves the right questions and we allow ourselves to be able to do it. See, we're in a society now, I feel anyway, and maybe you'll actually go along with me here. We're in a society that virtually everything seems to be negative. People are looking for issues that sometimes aren't even there. We need to find fault with other people. We need to find fault with ourselves. And the reality is, no, we don't. Look, we're human beings. We're all going to make mistakes, obviously, but that's how we learn. As long as we identify what went wrong and what we can do to change it next time to make it even better. So the thing is, when it comes to communication, we've got to be so careful how we talk to ourselves. And I think it was Brené Brown. Forgive me if I got the quote wrong, but she said, talk to yourself as if you talk to someone that you love. And that's so true, because most people talk to themselves as if they don't like themselves. But as Jim Rohn said, we've got the one body. If that breaks down, where else are you going to live? So we need to talk to ourselves in the right way. And we do that by asking ourselves empowering questions. Okay. And reaffirming the stuff that we've actually done really well in life. Because, I'm going to congratulate you now. Congratulations on being the person that you are, even if you're going through challenges right now. And the reason why I say that is the fact that you will have overcome challenges in your life already, because you wouldn't be where you are right now if you hadn't. And that may well be driving test, just learning to drive. You've overcome that particular challenge of not knowing how to do that, and now you can drive, potentially. Because what we tend to do, because society is actually focusing so much on the negative, we tend to forget the really good things that we've actually done. And when we come to talk to ourselves, we tend to forget these. So what I would suggest to you is you grab a piece of paper after this particular podcast, and you start listing all the things that you've been really, really successful at. And it could be anything. It could be the fact of, look, getting up in the morning, because there are so many people that would love to get up in the morning, but they can't. And it's the simple things. And the reason why I say this is what you're actually doing then is you are what's called positively stacking all your successes. And what I suggest to you as well is read them on a regular basis, daily, several times a day, and keep on adding to this list. Doesn't matter how big, how small. And when you come across a situation, you know, the fact of, right, when was the last time I was successful at something along these lines? Because your mind works exactly like a Google search engine. So when you ask the question, it's going to give you a load of answers, you know? So if you're asking yourself really empowering questions, it's going to give you loads of answers that are also going to be empowering. If you're going to ask yourself disempowering questions, as in, why can't I do this? You know, it's going to give you a massive list of why you can't do it and why you've not been successful before now. And that's why I say you are already successful. You've had successes in your life. You may well be going through some challenges, but these challenges have always got a solution. And again, if you listen to my story, I had loads of challenges. There's no two ways about it. But I overcame them. And if I can do that, then so can you. Remind yourself how successful you've been throughout your life. And when that mindset changes and you start looking for the solutions, then things are actually going to start to change as well. Okay, so we've actually done communication, we've done physiology. Now, where are we? Okay. So the final section as far as the triad or the triangle is concerned is focus. So the reality is what you focus on at that particular time. See, when we're actually going through challenges, we normally focus on what's not going right. Yeah, I know, I certainly did. See, the thing is, our minds, like I say, works like a Google search engine, but it also works an awful lot like a guidance rocket or a guidance missile, if you will. You know, it gets fired from A, destination is B, it gets blown off course, etc. However, it knows where it's going to be going, so it keeps on readjusting itself to make sure it hits the target. Our mind works in a very similar way. See, what we focus on, we attract. Okay? And that's the reality. If we're focusing on a not so good outcome, then we're going to add things to that mindset that we're going to attract staying in that particular, not necessarily a good place. Whereas if we focus on something that is going to be empowering, something that we want to achieve, then we will attract something that is going to help us with that as well. Okay? It may well sound a bit surreal, but let me ask you a question. I touched on it a bit earlier on. So, if you're actually feeling really challenged at this moment in time, this is how simple it can change, okay? So, I'll use myself as the example as the settee slug, you know, where I wasn't moving or doing anything in reality. And then if you went to the bathroom, let's see, okay, if you've got one of these things called mobile phones and you dropped it down the loo, not intentionally, it was a pure accident, would you move quickly then? Would your focus change? So the reality is, yes. See, because our focus then becomes our mobile phone is a lifeline for so many people. And it would be a case where we'll push anyone or anything out of the way because we need to get it in the rice or whatever to dry it out because it's that important. That's how easy it is to actually change our focus. So it's what we focus on will give us the outcome that we want. Now, like I say, when I was going through my challenges, this was my pattern. Settee slug. My communication was, I can't do anything. I'm no good at anything. How can I even think about changing my solution? I'm a waste of time being a human being. And my focus was nowhere. My focus, like I said, was nowhere apart from possibly Jeremy Kyle. And I've not got shares in Jeremy Kyle, by the way. I know I've mentioned him an awful lot. See, my focus was on staying where I was, not focusing on the future. When I had the change around, first of all, I turned the telly off. I started moving. I did start exercising. Hey, it changed my physiology. My physiology would have changed anyway because I was not being the satie slug. So it changed my physiology, and it started running again. The communication to myself was, right, I've achieved so many things in the past. I can achieve them and more in the future. And my focus was, what can I do to make my life better? And that's how I started searching for things. And lo and behold, all of these things started working together. And then I started to make these steps of improvement. Well, that's it. I didn't know this particular system at the time, but that's what I started to do. It's only in retrospect that is what I did to get to where I am. And I still use this now, on a daily basis, as I shared a bit earlier on. Why? Because it works. And that's why these particular 3 sections are actually so important. And I've actually shared these with right across the board, whether it be from single parents to CEOs and managing directors of large UK organizations, right across the board. Because guess what? Just because someone may well be in charge of a massive organization, they still have the same challenges as everyone else because we're all human beings.
Thanks for joining the Midlife Men podcast. If you want to find out more about Dave's techniques, you can visit his website at www.davewilliamscoaching.com, and I'll put the link in the episode notes. If you are suffering from feelings of depression or anxiety, then general advice is to go and see your GP in the first instance if you can. If you have a suggestion for a topic you'd like us to cover in the podcast, or if you have a story you'd like to share, then please contact me either on Twitter @midlifemen or email me at midlifemen01@gmail.com. Join me next time when we talk to other midlife men about their stories, and maybe you'll find that they resonate with you. Thank you.